revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. One choice, one word, and an empire falls. For Caitlin Clark, revenge wasn't firing tweets or snapping back in interviews. It was quiet. It was final. She said no. No to Geno Auriemma. No to UConn. No to their $1 million offer. On paper, it sounded insane. Who walks away from $1 million for 8 weeks of basketball? But this wasn't just a contract. It was the lifeline of a man who belittled her, dismissed her. When Clark said no, she didn't skip a paycheck, she shattered his pride.
That's the worst part about new fans. You know, they have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
And that's what makes this story bigger than basketball. It isn't just about points, assists, or trophies. It's about power. For decades, Geno Auriemma was the gatekeeper of women's basketball, the coach who decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, and who faded into obscurity. But Caitlin Clark flipped that script. She didn't need his approval, his program, or his checkbook. She built her empire without him. And when he finally reached out, she turned him away with the kind of quiet authority that says, "I don't need you. You need me." Every revenge story starts with a mistake. Geno's wasn't a bad play call or a blown timeout. It was arrogance. Before Clark became the face of the sport, before the sellout crowds and record-shattering ratings, she was just a kid with a dream. She openly admitted it. UConn was the mountaintop, the home of Taurasi, Moore, Stewart. For a girl in Iowa, there was nothing bigger. Recruitment time came and the path seemed obvious. The most electrifying talent of her generation paired with the greatest recruiter women's basketball had ever seen. But the call never came. Geno never reached out to Clark, never called her parents, barely sent word through her AAU coach. And it wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. UConn had already landed Paige Buchers and decided they didn't need another point guard. On the surface, fine. But then came the insult. Geno suggested that if Clark wanted UConn, she should have called him. Think about that. The coach who built his reputation on spotting generational talent years before anyone else decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort and then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. It wasn't just a recruiting miss. It was disrespect. And Clark filed it away. If Geno didn't believe in her, she'd go where someone did. So she chose Iowa. No banners, no mystique, no dynasty glow. To many, it looked like a consolation prize. But for Clark, it was liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow or Geno's afterthought. She was the recruit, the face of the program. And from her first game in Iowa City, she rewrote the narrative. Her logo threes weren't just shots, they were statements. Her sold-out arenas weren't just crowds, they were proof. Her record-shattering ratings weren't flukes, they were receipts. Every basket, every highlight, every record screamed the same thing: you missed this. Meanwhile, Geno doubled down. Instead of humility, he leaned on arrogance. He brushed her off with condescending soundbites, calling her a kid playing like she's in the driveway. He tried to shrink her brilliance into something ordinary. But ordinary doesn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary doesn't drag the WNBA into mainstream relevance. Ordinary doesn't cost you millions. And that's the irony. Geno closed the door when Caitlin Clark knocked. He thought she'd fade into just another good player. Instead, she built the biggest empire women's basketball has ever seen without him. When he finally circled back, contract in hand, Clark didn't rage. She didn't gloat. She simply said no. And that one word cost him more than any championship loss ever could. Even then, Geno couldn't help himself. Anytime Clark's name came up, he dragged her back into Paige Buchers comparisons. If Clark was fearless, so was Paige. If Clark connected with fans, so had Paige. It wasn't random, it was strategy. By tethering Clark's rise to his players, Geno kept himself in the conversation, as if her success was just another branch of the dynasty he built. But backhanded compliments were thin. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. Other coaches noticed. Clark's brilliance didn't need qualifiers, she was rewriting the sport before their eyes. And still, there was Geno, smiling for cameras, clinging to a throne he could no longer hold. Then came June 2024. The mask slipped. The slide digs turned into open shots. In an interview on the Dan Patrick Show, the Hall of Fame coach didn't just question Caitlin Clark, he went after her fans. That's when the story stopped being about basketball. It became about a power shift too big to ignore.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on what are like she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP of the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
His words weren't subtle. Geno called Caitlin Clark's fans delusional, claimed they didn't understand the game, and even said they were damaging women's basketball. Their crime? Believing Clark could finish top 4 in MVP voting as a rookie. To Geno, that wasn't passion. It was stupidity. And Diana Taurasi doubled down, this kid's in for a rude awakening. Think about that for a second. Millions of new eyes had just flooded into women's basketball because of Clark. Families were buying jerseys, kids were camping outside arenas, casual fans were tuning into WNBA broadcasts for the first time ever, and Geno's response wasn't gratitude or celebration. It was insult. This wasn't analysis. This wasn't a coach breaking down film. This was personal. It was a direct shot at the lifeblood of Clark's rise, the fans who had carried women's basketball into the mainstream. Geno wasn't just dismissing Clark. He was dismissing the movement she led. And because he's Geno Auriemma, people listened. His words carried weight, which made them that much more damaging. By calling her supporters clueless, he wasn't just underestimating them. He was underestimating her, saying the hype wasn't real, the success wasn't sustainable, and in the end, he'd be proven right. But he wasn't. Clark didn't clap back on social media. She didn't rant in interviews. She didn't need to. Her answer came where it mattered most, the court. And what followed wasn't just vindication. It was demolition. Clark won Rookie of the Year. She made all WNBA first team. And when the MVP votes were counted, she finished fourth exactly where her delusional fans predicted. The very prediction Geno laughed at became reality, and with it, his authority crumbled. This wasn't just a win for Clark, it was vindication for the fans he mocked. Every parent who brought their kid to see her, every casual fan who tuned in, every believer he dismissed as a problem, Clark proved them prophetic. And the beauty of it? She did it all without saying a word. No rant. No confrontation. Just results. Her logo threes, her crossovers, her no-look passes, every night she left no room for excuses. By the time the awards were announced, there was no debate. She had silenced him without ever speaking his name. That was the poetry of it. Geno positioned himself as the gatekeeper of women's basketball, the wise elder who knew better than the fans, the media, maybe even the game itself. And yet, the fans were right. Clark was right. Geno was wrong. Every sellout, every broken record, every accolade was another reminder that he wasn't the kingmaker anymore. She didn't need him. She never did. And that's the irony. Clark wasn't trying to prove Geno wrong. She wasn't chasing his approval. She wasn't even thinking about him. She was just being Caitlin Clark, and that was enough to humble him. By the end of her rookie year, the question wasn't whether Clark had lived up to the hype. It was how completely she had obliterated every doubt. Geno's comments about her fans aged like milk in the sun, bitter, insecure, embarrassingly wrong. But Geno couldn't let go. Interview after interview, podcast after podcast, her name was never far from his lips. A little praise, a little dig, a compliment wrapped in a disclaimer. And every time, it became more obvious. Caitlin Clark wasn't just rewriting the record books. She was living rent-free in Geno Auriemma's head. Eventually, words weren't enough. If he couldn't control the narrative with his mouth, maybe he could with money. That's when the $1 million offer appeared. A new 3-on-3 league, backed by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, had the funding, the vision, but it needed a face. And once again, Geno reached out. But Caitlin Clark's revenge didn't come with fireworks. It came with one word. No.
And there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
And that's when the desperation showed. For all the big names involved, only one player could give the project instant legitimacy. Only one athlete could pull in millions of fans, media partners, and sponsors. Only one star could turn unrivaled into a true rival for the WNBA. That star was Caitlin Clark. And so Geno did the unthinkable, he came knocking. Reports confirmed the league offered Clark over $1 million for an 8-week season, one of the richest deals ever in women's basketball. Think about it. The coach who once ignored her recruitment was now dangling 7 figures. The man who mocked her hype was suddenly trying to monetize it. The same coach who called her fans delusional now needed them. The irony was delicious.
Look like Geno Auriemma. could be the reason why Caitlin Clark is definitely not joining the unrivaled 3-on-3 basketball league.
Make no mistake, this wasn't just business. It was personal. If Geno landed Clark, he could rewrite the narrative, claim her rise was tied to his system, his vision, his empire. But Clark wasn't fooled. When the contract hit her desk, she didn't see opportunity. She saw a test, a desperate power grab from the man who once tried to diminish her.
They've tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to make the most of Caitlin Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlin Clark was going to play.
Her answer was swift and devastating. No explanations. No hedging. No hesitation. Just one word that carried more weight than all of Geno's interviews combined. She didn't need his money. She didn't need his platform. She didn't need his approval. Clark's rejection wasn't just personal revenge, it was cultural. It marked a shift in power, a line in the sand between the old guard and the new. She showed an entire generation of athletes that they don't need permission, validation, or approval to lead. They already have the fans, the numbers, and the star power to chart their own path. And Clark proved it with the simplest of weapons, a single no. Maybe revenge isn't best served cold. Maybe the sweetest revenge is served quietly, with calm finality, in a moment that exposes just how desperate your enemy has become. Caitlin Clark didn't just reject a contract, she rejected Geno's authority, his empire, and his narrative. And in doing so, she changed the game. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.